We will start by covering this rich fruit cake with marzipan, and then we'll put a layer of fondant. Okay. So the marzipan is a nut paste. When we use marzipan, we have to avoid using cornstarch. The only product which we are allowed to use would be the icing sugar. Just kneading a little bit, and then we'll start rolling. So just going to sprinkle some icing sugar to make sure that the marzipan doesn't stick to the surface. Now marzipan can be used for covering any kind of cake, but in particular is well known for covering rich fruit cakes. And over the marzipan you can put a layer of fondant like we will do, or you can put a layer of, or 2 layers or 3 layers of royal icing, depending on the type of the project you want to create. You can also leave the marzipan uncovered, but if you are planning to give a bit more modern look to the cake and you want to add further decorations, then you will have to put some fondant. So I'm just moving around the sheet of marzipan to make sure I get a nice even thickness. But if you prefer to use like guides when you roll, or the spacers, that's also fine. Okay, once I get to the size required, I haven't actually measured the cake, but that looks just enough to cover. I'm going to lift my marzipan and place it over the cake. Now, comparing with fondant, this marzipan is super versatile. It's got a high percentage of fat, so it will be very easy to maneuver and to repair if it gets broken. But for any cake with straight edges, I'm going to push in the corners first with the palm of my hand, just setting the paste in place. Regardless that I'm talking here about marzipan or fondant, the same principle applies. Again, just going on the side, and then I will start smoothing. Now the cake is loose on the board, as I'm planning to transfer this cake onto a different board. Then with my smoothers, I'm going to polish. Now one of the smoothers, as you know, it's got a straight edge, so that is just perfect to mark the excess. Just pressing the smoother perpendicular onto the surface. And with the help of a little palette knife or a knife, I can trim off the excess. Okay, and I can just remove the left and check the leftover marzipan to make sure that I don't have any traces of jam, as the glue, so-called glue, which I've used for sticking the marzipan onto the cake, was actually some apricot jam. So this will go into a little bag, or it can be wrapped in cling film. And we can use this to create decorations, maybe just shape pure little fruits or make flowers. We can color the marzipan, just leave it as it is. Okay, so our cake is nicely covered with a coat of marzipan. If, for example, you are aiming to get a straight edge, what you can do on the side of the cake, you have to just flush this smoother and then start applying pressure, and that's going to help you to get a nice sharp edge. Okay, and then you can carry on with the next one. Just always use that straight edge as a guide. If required. Okay, it's a bit time consuming, but it does work nicely in case that your project involves having a straight edge. As my project doesn't have such a thing involved, I will not stress too much. Okay, so I'm going to leave this on one side, then start rolling my fondant to place it over. Because my marzipan is fresh, I don't need to put anything over to stick my fondant. I will just literally put the fondant over. And I'm using the PME fondant in white. Just be cutting about 400 to 500 grams of fondant. I will be starting by conditioning the fondant first. Just kneading in that vegetable fat. Now my fondant is nice and smooth, so I'm going to place this face down and start rolling backwards and forwards. Lift the fondant and keep moving the fondant around. And you can obviously get a ruler, measure the size of the cake. I've got 4 inches on the top and 2 inches on the side, so 2 with 4 and 2, that makes 8. We'll just do the same thing along. So 8 by 11, so I've got 11 here, and I've got just a little bit over 8 inch in width, so I can pick this up and literally just place it over my cake. Because it's such a small piece of cake, I can very easily lift the fondant and move it around. Going to start by smoothing the top, making sure that that's nicely stuck to the cake, as I don't want any air bubbles. I'm going to sprinkle some icing sugar to make sure that my smoother doesn't get stuck on here. Keep polishing to make sure it gets a good contact. Then I will start covering the corners first, unfolding the fondant and sticking the fondant on the cake. Finished all corners, and then each panel I'm going to help the fondant to get flushed with the cake without creating any creases. Same in here, unfold, smooth, and same in here, without stretching too much, as it's not so elastic and it might get damaged. Again, just going to cut the excess with a knife. and give a quick polish on the side. Okay, so I've got a cake with edges, but with a chamfered finishing, I mean a round finishing on the edges. Okay, and this is going to be transferred into a different board and then decorated accordingly. And the fondant, the leftover fondant, will go into my bag so it stays away from the air. And that's my cake ready to be placed on the final board and decorated. Now, to cover a round cake with fondant, I'm going to use my pre-colored fondant. Now the size of my cake, I've got 9-inch wide, 3-inch deep cake, a round cake. So I've got 3-inch with 9 and with 3. That makes 15 inches. So when I will start rolling my fondant, I will have to aim for about a 15-inch round sheet. So just going to give a quick knead to my fondant. Now I'm not going to add more vegetable fat as I've just colored this fondant, but if the fondant will not be a freshly kneaded one, I would always suggest to use the vegetable fat. I'm going to sprinkle some sugar to make sure that the fondant doesn't stick to the table, and I will just run my hand over to make sure that I don't get too many spots of sugar onto my fondant. And again, that nice smooth side down, and I will just put some pressure to stretch my fondant and start rolling backwards and forwards. Lift and turn around. Again, backwards and forwards. If needed, you can always use the rolling pin to move your fondant around. And again, just backwards and forwards. And if the fondant starts getting into a weird shape, you can always bring in the corners and maintain that round shape as you go along. Keep rolling. So I have to aim for a 15-inch sheet, but in the same time I don't want a very thick layer of fondant, so I'm going to carry on rolling. Maybe a little bit more than 15, just because I don't want it very thick. I'm going to smooth. Now I will have to sprinkle some sugar, otherwise my smoother will get stuck onto the fondant, and I will start smoothing the surface. And I will just get my fondant onto my rolling pin, and then get the cake in front of me so that you can see what happens. You always have to make sure that the cake is centered in the center of your sheet, and also you start with a sheet of fondant right from the base of the cake, and you just flip this over so that it covers your cake completely. And then you will have to start smoothing the top, relaxing the top of the cake. Make sure that the fondant is not trapping any air bubbles in between the cake and the fondant. So we'll just start stretching, and that's going to also help the fondant to get relaxed on the side and just cover the side of the cake. So that's perfectly neat. Now I'm going to go around the top edge to secure the fondant so it doesn't start creating any damages. And then I will start going around with my palm, trying to stretch my fondant gently without deteriorating to cover the sides. So always use the palm to help you with this. You just go around, just keep going. And also I want to cover the board in one go. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my smoother just to do a quick polish on the side. And then we'll try to cover the board as well. I've got a little bit of piece missing, but I can always just add some more fondant in here and then secure. Okay, so I'm just going to keep one of my smoothers on the top, and with the other one dried with sugar, I'm going to start polishing. So just a very basic type of decorating, smoothing and polishing. Okay, so once this is done, I can trim off the excess either with a knife or a palette knife. If the cake is too heavy to be kept in your hand, you can obviously use a turning table. The same like we did on the board, we'll have to just go around and shape off the excess. Okay, the fondant will have to stay covered so that it doesn't get dry. We'll just use the smoother to tidy up the edge as well. Okay, then we'll get our double-sided tape and we'll place that around the board. Overlapping the sticky side, always leaving that excess to help us to secure the next bit. And I'm going to place that ribbon make sure that the ribbon is flushed with the table. Take away the excess. Then maybe using your scallop tool, just put a bit of an indentation. I've just noticed I've marked the side by mistake, so I'm going to quickly polish. And also I can notice some air bubbles in here, so I have to get rid of those air bubbles, ideally with a needle tool or with a little sharp tool. So with the scallop tool right here on the edge, I'm going to apply a little bit of pressure just to create a nice texture right on the edge. Same pressure going around. So just a plain decorated cake. And the next thing which I'm going to do, I'm going to put a crimping effect right on the top. In order to put the crimping effect, I'm going to use a crimper. They do come in two different sizes. Some are small, some others are large. And they also can have a serrated edge or just a plain edge. So I'm going to use the serrated edge. Just put a little bit of icing sugar so I can dry the end of the tool into icing sugar. And I'm going to pinch, just inserting this into the fondant. Pinching, releasing, and taking this away. Just to create more like a wave kind of frill around the top. From time to time, the end of the tool will have to be dried with some icing sugar. That creates a really nice crown-like effect on the top. Okay. And now I'm going to quickly do a ribbon rose using some of my white fondant. Grabbing that icing sugar so it doesn't stick to the surface. Going to roll this into a sausage. Use my rolling pin to flatten the strip. Okay. Sometimes it's easier to work with a small rolling pin. And I'm going to fold and also secure some air right along the top edge. And from one end, I will start rolling and folding in some creases. Now what I really want is just to keep everything at the same level. So just rolling and folding, rolling and folding to create a large so-called ribbon rose. Okay. Then I'm going to trim the base. And just look for the front of the cake, as it always is always a front and a back of the cake. So that's going to go in here. And with this piece left, I can make two small roses. Either using the same method, or in fact, let's do it by hand. So I'm going to cut this in half, start rolling into a ball shape, then into an elongated shape, and I'm going to flatten. And then from one end, I will start creating a similar effect, and then just trim the base to secure the other two roses. One. And two, either on flat on the table or in your hand, whatever you feel more comfortable with. That's kind of a budget type of flower, very easy and very pretty to make and super quick, so time saving. Okay, so just going to use those as basic decoration, and I'm also going to use some green to make some leaves. And for example, to make her ribbon leaf in the same way we did the ribbon rose. We'll just get this in half, and we'll just fold in the end, and then again, then we'll pinch the top and remove the base. So that's going to create a pretty ribbon leaf. Same in here, so just fold, fold, fold again, pinch the top and remove the base. I can go in here. And just to complete the design, going to roll into a bowl shape, and then a teardrop shape, flatten. Then with my Dresden tool, going to run that to the center and just shorten to the right length required. That can be another leaf for my floral arrangement. And I can just get this underneath. Just to complete the design, and I can put another one very quickly, just into a shape like a teardrop shape. You can go in here. And just another one, just to make sure that we've got like an uneven number of elements in here. Okay, so that can be a very quick and easy a type of design suitable for a budget cake.